Let's just dive right in. Welcome to today's Explainer, where we're unpacking what has to be one of the most mind-bending historical paradoxes of the modern era. We're going to look at how two nations currently locked in this bitter, high-stakes shadow war actually started out as absolute geopolitical best friends. Honestly, the story of Iran and Israel is packed with twists that seem completely impossible today. Because look, today we know the reality, right? They're mortal enemies constantly threatening mutual destruction. But rewind to the 1960s, and these two were secretly tight. I'm talking clandestine meetings, swapping lavish gifts, signing incredibly sensitive agreements. It sounds absolutely absurd now, but get this. The very nuclear program at the center of today's massive crisis, it was originally a gift from the US and Israel to Iran. So how on earth did we get from that secret bromance to today's outright hostility? Which brings us to part one, an unlikely secret friendship. To understand the why behind this whole thing, we've got to rewind to the Middle East right after World War I. You had Arab nations newly independent from the fallen Ottoman Empire, and this huge wave of Arab nationalism was just sweeping the region. Iran, though, totally different story. They were an established power, distinctly Persian, with a Shia Muslim majority. So Iran's Shah, Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, looks at this rising tide of Sunni Arab nationalism and sees a massive, direct threat. He was terrified they'd unite and challenge his dominance, especially over the waterway the Arabs were suddenly starting to call the Arabian Gulf instead of the Persian Gulf. So, the Ottoman Empire falls in 1922. Tensions are simmering, and then, boom, 1948, the UN creates the State of Israel. Almost immediately, Israel faces all-out war from its Arab neighbors. Now, obviously a massive crisis for Israel, but for Iran, they quietly saw this as a huge strategic relief. Why? Because all of a sudden, their Arab rivals were totally distracted by Israel. It took all the heat right off Tehran. Moving on to part two, the periphery doctrine. Okay, so put yourself in Israel's shoes. Brand new, tiny state, entirely surrounded by hostile neighbors. Their survival basically depended on this brilliant, outside-the-box strategy from their first prime minister, David Ben-Gurion. It was called the periphery doctrine. Ben-Gurion realized, look, if our immediate neighbors are our enemies, we need to leapfrog them and reach out to the outer edges, the periphery of the Middle East. Making alliances with non-Arab states became the absolute anchor of our whole story here. It made nations like Turkey and, most crucially, Iran the most valuable pieces on Israel's strategic chessboard. And you know what? It worked incredibly fast. By 1950, Iran becomes the second Muslim-majority nation, right after Turkey, to de facto recognize Israel. They did it through this quiet little formal letter via the Swiss government. It basically kicked off what everyone called an open secret. The Shah let Israel open a trade mission right in Tehran. And guys, this place functioned exactly like a massive official embassy. I mean, they had engineers, doctors, military advisors, the whole shebang. The only catch? No Israeli flag out front, no official sign. Everyone knew what it was, but officially just a trade office. So you might be wondering, why would the Shah take such a massive risk? Well, he was highly pragmatic and had three main motivations. First off, he wanted to modernize Iran, make it an industrial powerhouse, and he desperately needed Israel's cutting-edge agricultural and military tech. Second, like we mentioned, he was terrified of Arab nationalism, especially Egypt's Gamal Abdel Nasser, who he thought might target Iran next. And third, and honestly maybe the most critical, he owed his throne to the US. Back in 1953, the CIA literally stepped in to stop his prime minister from stripping his powers. The US was heavily pushing for this regional friendship, so to keep them happy, the Shah leaned right into the alliance. Let's jump into Section 3, Oil, Nukes, and Spies. This whole pragmatic setup didn't just stay on paper, it evolved into some seriously deep cooperation. It's wild to think about now, but Israel's intelligence agency, Mossad, was actually tasked with training the Shah's highly feared secret police, Savak. Mossad taught them surveillance, interrogation techniques, basically how to suppress the Shah's domestic opposition. On top of that, these two agencies were constantly sharing intel, actively teaming up to take down communist threats and Arab militants in the region. They even sent Iranian pilots to Israel for advanced flight training. But it wasn't just spies and military hardware, it was a deep economic partnership too. And this one number really perfectly sums up their economic brotherhood: 50-50. They literally split the cost, the risk, and the ownership of a massive infrastructure project right down the middle just to bypass their mutual enemies. So here's how that 50-50 split actually worked. Israel is desperate for oil, but they're facing an Arab boycott. Iran has oceans of oil, but they can't easily get it to Europe because Egypt controls the Suez Canal. The solution? Build a secret pipeline. Iranian oil would leave Karg Island, ship down to Israel's Eilat port on the Red Sea, get pumped completely overland to Ashkelon on the Mediterranean, and from there, ship straight to Europe. It was an absolute genius workaround. It totally broke the Arab oil monopoly, kept Israel fueled up, and made Iran incredibly rich. And right here is where we hit the ultimate historical irony. Back in 1967, under President Eisenhower's Atoms for Peace program, the U.S. gave Iran its very first nuclear research reactor at Tehran University. But the real kicker, the people who actually trained the Iranian nuclear experts were Israeli scientists. Yeah, the very same scientific program that Israel and the U.S. are actively trying to dismantle today. All of this kicked off what people call the golden era of their friendship. It was so close, but still so secretive, that Israeli Prime Minister David Ben-Gurion literally wore a wig when he landed at the Tehran airport just to dodge the press. And in 1971, when the Shah threw this insane $100 million party in the desert of Persepolis to celebrate the 2500th anniversary of the Persian Empire, Israel couldn't get a public invite, obviously, because it would upset the other guests. But behind the scenes, it was Mossad that planned and ran the entire security operation for the party. All right, Section 4, the 1979 Islamic Revolution. That whole golden era of wigs, secret pipelines, and shared intel, it was living on borrowed time. Just 8 years after that massive Persepolis party, we hit 1979, and the Islamic Revolution completely flips the game board. Ayatollah Khomeini ousts the Shah, turns Iran into an Islamic republic, and almost instantly declares the Shah a traitor. More importantly for our story, he officially names Israel the primary enemy of Islam. And you saw the physical reality of this shift immediately. Within weeks, that open, secret Israeli trade mission in Tehran got violently attacked. The Israelis had to flee, and the Ayatollah literally handed the keys to the building over to Palestinian leader Yasser Arafat, permanently turning it into the official embassy of Palestine. The pipeline was shut down, the secret police Savak was dissolved, and the alliance looked totally dead and buried. Which takes us to our final section, Birth of the Shadow War. Now, the Shah is gone, the embassy is sacked, the rhetoric is just at an all-time high. You'd probably assume every ounce of cooperation officially died right then and there. But did it? Surprisingly, no, because raw geopolitical pragmatism, that exact same instinct that kicked out their friendship in the first place, struck one last, completely unbelievable time. Just a year after the revolution, the massive, devastating 8-year Iran-Iraq war breaks out. Khomeini's Iran is suddenly desperate for weapons. And who steps in to secretly supply them? Israel. Seriously. Despite all the public hatred, Israel funneled weapons to the new Islamic Republic for one simple reason. They wanted to weaken their mutual Arab neighbor, Iraq. It's the classic enemy of my enemy is my friend scenario, even if that friend just publicly declared you the enemy of Islam. It really wasn't until after the Iran-Iraq war ended around 1990 that the music finally stopped. With Iraq severely weakened, Israel looks over at Iran and realizes a deeply terrifying reality. That nuclear program they helped start, the one they trained scientists for, it's now fully operational and it's completely in the hands of the Islamic Republic. That realization officially killed any remaining pragmatism, and it kicked off the intense modern shadow war that dominates our global headlines right now. So this brings us to a really fascinating final thought I want to leave you with. This whole explainer really just highlights the cold, totally unsentimental reality of geopolitics. If pure mutual survival instincts created both their secret brotherhood in the 60s and their bitter shadow war today, what would it actually take for the pendulum of history to swing back? Could some new, unforeseen mutual threat ever force these bitter enemies back to the same side of the table? It is definitely something worth pondering as we watch the Middle East continue to evolve. Thanks so much for joining me, and as always, keep questioning the history behind the headlines.